So this is the 15th episode of the Teeth Time podcast, and I'm here today in my hometown of Nashville, Tennessee. It's just going to be me today on this podcast episode, and I'm doing something that I've been really excited to do, which is to officially sit down and give the entire full recap of my first ever half marathon. So really quickly, you guys probably know, if you're regular listeners of the podcast or viewers of my YouTube channel, I do like to talk about things other than dentistry and dental school. I think that my objective with all of this is a little bit more life than just dentistry and dental school, because I think that dentistry and dental school are just one element of our lives, and there are a lot more things that I like to cover and things that I think I can cover. And one of those things has been running. So I haven't done a great job covering my running content like I hoped I could, but this is going to be an episode full of just the entire story of my first half marathon. I'm going to go into all the details about what happened, about the race itself, about the lead up, during, and then after, and just all the details. I'm not sparing anything. I will also be doing a video on YouTube that's going to be a lot shorter, just covering some of the things that I learned, some of the major takeaways that I have after running my first ever half marathon, because I think there are a lot of people out there who might benefit from hearing about the experience of someone who had never done it before. So let's get into it. I don't want to waste any more time. I want to start with just basically a little bit of a background on why I just ran a half marathon and why I think this is important and significant in my life. So I think I've made reference to this before on the channel or on the podcast. I never really was a runner. Growing up, I didn't enjoy running all that much, as most kids are. I played multiple sports. I played hockey and lacrosse, to be specific, and so I had to run in some of our after-school workouts and like off-ice workouts and things. I had to run, but I just never enjoyed it. I always thought I was bad at it. I always thought that I wasn't a distance runner, just like wasn't in my DNA or in my genetics or whatever. And so it's just something I avoided for essentially my entire life. You fast forward to my adult life, and COVID rolls around in the year of 2020, as we all know. I basically lost my job, and I didn't have anything to do, as most people were in that same position. So I was like, well, one of my goals lately has been to get back in shape. I really want to get back in shape. I want to start kind of building these healthy habits so that the older I get, there's already this sort of precedent set for me personally, or there's this groundwork built, this foundation of being a healthy person, so that as I get older, I'm not having to, it's already going to be a battle to stay healthy, but I don't want to have it be more of an uphill battle because I haven't been doing anything for all these years. So I was like, I want to get back into shape, and I don't know why, but the thing that I just sort of navigated to directly was running. I started running around my neighborhood, and then that quickly expanded as I downloaded the Nike Run Club app and started getting really into it. And before I knew it, I was very into running, and that went on for the better part of, I guess, a year, over a year. And then in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, maybe at some point I actually make this a real thing. I make this a legit thing and do some sort of real race. And I think the major inspiration for that was watching Nick Bare and his content and seeing how he attacked these races. And granted, his life's work involves the fitness industry, and so his personal fitness is extremely important to him. But I was watching him do all this stuff, and it kind of inspired me. Maybe I should try that. So I finally decided around this past summer, I think it was June or July, and I made a video about it, decided to finally sign up for a marathon. Specifically, I decided that a half marathon would be good for me. And the reason I decided that was because at the time I'd been running, I think maybe at tops I had run a 10 mile run and a few 8-mile runs, and the rest were like, regular 4 to 5 mile runs. So that's kind of what I was doing. So I'm thinking, okay, half marathon seems reasonable. I've done a 10K, so like on my own time. So I think the half would be a fun challenge to take on, and I'd never done anything like that. So I signed up for the Rock and Roll Nashville half marathon, which would be on November 20th, 2021, which was months away back when I signed up. So I thought, I have all this time to prepare. I'm going to make a full series on YouTube where I document my training and everything I'm doing. Unfortunately, that aspect of it didn't happen because I just don't have the infrastructure yet for my YouTube channel to make the kind of content that I want to make. And I think people like Think Media, these people who sort of peddle YouTube content as far as like how to make YouTube videos and what type of content to create, they would disagree with my statement. And they would say, just film something and put it out there. But for me, I really do want I have this like standard in my head of what type of content I want to put out and the level of quality. And I wasn't able to do that on my own for this running series. And I think in the future I will be. I really need a cameraman. I need someone that can help me film. I don't even need help editing. I really can do all the editing stuff myself. I love video editing, and I think I have a little bit of a skill in doing that, but I really need someone to help me film. So eventually, when I have the funds, that'll be something I can do, and I can really create these series following training blocks and all sorts of stuff, and not just in running, also in dentistry and the things I'm doing in that realm. So that'll come eventually. All things come with time. So I didn't get to do the preparation video wise, but I did do the preparation just along with school. So this past semester has been my fall semester of my second year of dental school. Plenty to do school wise. This is our most difficult semester, and I plan to talk plenty about this in upcoming episodes of the podcast and on YouTube. But there's been a whole lot going on with school. And so I had to balance school and running, which is something that I do enjoy doing. Running gives me an opportunity to kind of get myself away from school a little bit, have an outlet, and it's a really healthy one at that. So I did train a good bit for the marathon, but I didn't really do as much as I would have liked. So basically, really, I ran about 15 to 20 miles a week from this point back to when I signed up for the marathon, half marathon, I should say. And it wasn't anything really specific. I didn't get into different types of running exercises. There's a lot of different types of training runs you can do. You can do things like tempo runs. You can do things like you can do track workouts. There's all sorts of different things. Of course, as I start to talk about it, I'm blanking on the different names of these runs. But really what I just did was I went out and I used the time, and I would run essentially as many miles as I kind of could, with the consideration of time and what was going on in that day, and also with how my body was feeling. And I tried to run at around an 8-minute pace when I was doing these training runs, because that's where I figured my half marathon pace would be. I figured about 8 minutes per mile. If I'm at that point or slightly faster than that, I'll be really happy, which we will get into in a second. So I did this for a few months. I trained and basically just got ready for this thing. Leading up to this, I felt like I didn't do as much as I would have liked. Once again, I would have loved to have done more strength training, more speed workouts, more mobility, and all sorts of different things, which I just didn't have time for. So you get around to this past week, actually, and I basically I go back a little bit more. 2 weeks ago, I ran a 12-mile run, which was the longest that I had done in training. I made a video about it on YouTube and just kind of showed you what that was like. I ran 12 miles in Memphis, which is where I live full time, and I did it at about an 8-minute pace, 8-minute per mile pace. And it was difficult. I didn't feel very good about it. It was hard. I felt really tired at the end of it. And then I basically took a bunch of time off. And then that was once again 2 weeks ago. And then the beginning of this past week, I did a couple short runs, just like some 2-mile runs to keep my legs warm, I guess, and moving. And then I think before the marathon, which was this past Saturday, I don't think I ran for probably 4 or 5 days. So I just took them entirely off. I did some stretching throughout those days and make sure I was staying warm. I did some walks and things, but I didn't run because I wanted my legs to be as fresh as possible, which turned out to be a really good decision. So let's just go ahead and get into, I guess, race day, just because I think that's what matters the most. I guess the night before race day, I had a nice big dinner to fuel up. I think I just had like grilled chicken, cauliflower rice, some veggies, and I probably did some carb loading as well. I think I maybe did some English muffins, peanut butter, and stuff like that. The race was to start at 7:20 in the morning in downtown Nashville, and so I woke up at 4:20 because I wanted to be about 3 hours before so I could start getting my nutrition in and my coffee. So I woke up and I think I ate. What did I eat? This is where I should have written it down. I think I just had basically like a Cliff Bar, I had a, sorry, this is not going to get edited. This is going to be legitimate, minimal editing here. I had a couple pieces of toast with some peanut butter on them. And I think I had one of them with like sugary grape jelly. So I wanted to have some carbs and some sugars and all that going along in there. So I had that. I had some bananas. I think I had a Cliff Bar. And that was like the things that I ate on the morning of. And then I also had a big cup of coffee. And I think this is really important for those of you who do run and know the running process. There are times when you get into a run and you have to use the restroom. So drinking coffee before a run, specifically ideally like an hour or two or even more before a run, you are at a greater chance of having a good bowel movement before you run. And that's really, really important. So that was something that I did. And also too, because I drink coffee every morning pretty much, you want to kind of keep your regimen essentially the same as it normally is. You don't want to change anything too significantly. So I had that as my morning nutrition. It was really, really early in the morning, and I was only one up in my house, just kind of like pacing around in the dark, just thinking about the run and everything and trying to mentally prepare myself. Also drank a ton of water that morning, really made sure I was staying hydrated. It was not going to be warm by any means. It was actually going to be very cold. So I was looking at the weather, trying to figure out what to wear. And the weather was at the start of the race around 7:20, like I said, was supposed to be in the 30s. And by the end of the race, it was supposed to be sort of 40s, mid 40s to upper 40s. So I'm thinking that's pretty cold for me at least. So I had to kind of go back and forth on what I was going to wear, because the issue is like you don't want to be too much clothing and be hot, and you also want to be too little and be cold. You have to try to find that sort of balance. So I ended up, I'll go toe to head. How about that? Started with my shoes, the Saucony Endorphin Pros, the gin ones with the carbon plates in them. Those are the shoes I've talked about on the channel. Great pair of shoes. Just wore some ankle socks under those. And then wore a pair of tights, black tights, not cold gear tights, just something to stay over the skin of my legs. That ended up being a perfect decision. Had no trouble, no cold in my legs or anything like that. And then I also wore some 5-inch running shorts over those tights, so I could keep some stuff in this was like a little pocket, and keep the key to my truck in there. And then I think I maybe had a goo in there as well. And then under that, or above that, I wore the base layer of what I wore was a Nike Dry Fit quarter zip, which it's got some warmth to it. It's a little thicker on the thicker side. It's not super thin. So that was what I wore. And then I wore this shirt. If you're watching the YouTube version of the podcast, you can see the Nashville half marathon shirt that they gave us. Figured I'd wear that because I was a noob, and noobs wear the clothes that they give you for the event. That's how it goes. So since it was my first time, I went ahead and wore this shirt. Initially, I also had a long sleeve kind of dry fit shirt on under the Nike, but I ended up taking that off because I didn't want to be too hot. And then I wore my running hat that I always wear, and I wore some gloves, which actually got one of them here. Just basic like black liner gloves. I think we typically use these for skiing, just to keep my hands warm. Great decision on these, and I'll get into that a little bit as well. So that was what I wore. I drove down to downtown Nashville, specifically Nissan Stadium, where the Tennessee Titans play, parked there, and started to walk over the bridge, the pedestrian bridge, to Broadway in downtown Nashville, which is where the race was to begin. And I actually met up with 3 people. So one of them was my girlfriend's brother, her older brother, and then his girlfriend, and then her 2 friends. So that's actually 4. And I met up with them because they were all running in the half marathon. So I wasn't technically doing this alone. I had some friends there, and we met up. They all went to the bathroom, and the race was beginning at 7:20. So there was, as you can imagine, thousands and thousands of people in downtown Nashville at this point, most of which were obviously running in the marathon. You can tell because everybody's wearing their running clothes and their running shoes, and they have their bibs on and everything, which, by the way, the bib is also behind me, my bib that I wore. And so we ended up heading onto Broadway at like 7:20 when the first corral was starting. If you've never run in a marathon before, this is how it works. You essentially go online when you register, and you put in your expected mile time, your expected pace. And with that, they place everybody in an order from fastest, suspected fastest, to slowest. So the first group of people, or corral number 1, was the group of guys and gals who were running 5.5-minute paces for their marathons and half marathons. And they're the first group to start running, which makes perfect sense. Also, half marathon runners and marathon runners run together, at least for the first half, obviously. So it's all jumbled in and mixed together. The people that were running the full marathon had red bibs. The people that were running the half, like me, had blue bibs. And so we're all mixed in together. I think I'd put about 7:40 when I registered back in July for my time, my suspected time. So I was placed in corral number 3, obviously the third major group of people. And we hopped into this group of thousands of runners, and the energy was just unbelievable, which people always talk about this when they talk about marathons and half marathons and things. The energy is ridiculous. It's absolutely impossible to simulate the type of energy that you're going to feel on race day when you're just doing your training runs alone. It's absolutely impossible. And that's kind of a major theme of what I will get into here in a second, is just what happened to me. So get in this big line of people, you kind of are migrating up towards the start line. You get to the start line and it's like these gates basically. And there's a bunch of attendants that are standing at the gates, and they are basically, there's like beeps that are telling each line of people to go, and they spread them out a little bit. And then someone kind of yells at you, go, and you start running. There is a chip in your bib that is connected, I'm assuming, with the banners that they have that you run throughout the race. And that's going to give you your official time from the race. So I additionally wore my Apple Watch, obviously, which is something I wear on every run. And I went through right when I began and obviously started tracking my run with the Nike Run Club app, which is the app that I use to track my runs. So hit start on that thing right when I started, and they told me to go. I started running, and I was kind of running with the 2 guys from the group, my girlfriend's brother once again, and then his girlfriend's, it's kind of a long story, his girlfriend's brother. So I was running with those 2 guys, and just right down Broadway in Nashville, Tennessee, the main street of Nashville, Tennessee. I've been there many times, always to drink and have fun, as most people do, never to run. So that was a funny experience, running down this street in the brisk 7:20 in the morning, and all these people on each side just watching and cheering. It was really incredible, and it was exhilarating. There was this energy, this adrenaline, which immediately I'm kind of getting goosebumps thinking about it. Just doing this thing for the first time ever in my life, running in a real race with all these other people, was absolutely amazing. And it was an amazing feeling, and I felt wonderful. So run down Broadway, just kind of getting the legs under me, seeing how they feel. Because I hadn't run in those 4 or 5 days, whatever it was, I did feel fresh. My legs felt really fresh. So that was a good decision. And we run down Broadway, we turn right, we then turn right again, and we're off on the race basically. And it was at this point where things were interesting for me, because I didn't really know how to navigate this with running with other people. I kind of thought there was this expectation that I was supposed to run with them in a sense, which turns out was not at all what happened. Once we made that second turn, I kind of just felt good at the pace that I was running at, which was about a 7:20 pace. And so I just kept going, just kept running. And I left the 2 guys that I was running with behind me. Didn't really mean to, but I wanted to run the speed that I wanted to run, which turns out both of them were completely okay with that as well. And they ran at different times too. So I fell into line with this dude who was running next to me, and he was running at, once again, about a 7:20, 7:25 pace. And I started kind of drafting him. So I was running kind of right behind him and right next to him. And we ran together for the majority of the first kind of chunk, maybe 2.5 miles, maybe. Just running along in downtown Nashville. You know, the sun's up, coming up, and people are along on both sides. You've got businesses that you're running by, all sorts of cool places and buildings to see, just running along, and just felt absolutely wonderful. I mean, as you'll see here, the first 5 miles of this race, I felt fantastic. So I'm running along at a 7:20 pace. Now think back to what I said earlier. I planned to do this race based on my training runs, which were all about 7:55 to 8 minutes per mile. I planned to be running at about that speed. So I'm running at about 7:20 here, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is significantly faster than I planned to be at. And just for the record, I also have my splits here for reference. My first mile was at a 7:47 pace, so that's actually the slowest mile that I had, I think, which is pretty incredible. It is the slowest mile. So it started off kind of slow to just get warmed up, and then the second mile was a 7:15 pace. Third mile was at a 7:30 pace. So you can see I was floating around that kind of 7:20, 7:25 average there for those second and third miles. Fourth mile was back down to a 7:15. So I'm running along, and I'm thinking, this is too fast. This is faster than I've ever run on a distance run like this, and I'm not going to be able to make it all the way at this pace. Like, that was just my thought. And I'm thinking, at some point, my body's gonna have to slow down, right? Like I just can't keep this pace up. I'm running along with these people who clearly look like real runners. Like some of them looked like they maybe ran in college and stuff, not recently, but a few years ago or whatever. People running pretty fast. I mean, running at a good pace, and I'm thinking this is quick, but I just couldn't get myself to slow down because I had this weird competitive thing where if somebody passed me, it like sort of upset me a little bit. I didn't want people to pass me, so I was running fast, just couldn't help it. So the other first recognition or realization was that they have tables set up probably once every mile and a half, 2 miles, something like that. Maybe a little bit more frequently. And at these tables, they have everything as basic as just water. And then some of them have additionally Gatorade. Some of them had, they got more adventurous as we went on. So water and Gatorade for a while. And then one of them had big packets of like goo, essentially like electrolyte. And I think they probably have some amino acids and some other stuff in them, just like those energy gels that they have. So they had a big table of those, and randomly at like mile 6 or 7, they had a table full of potatoes. Not even kidding. It literally cracked me up. I was laughing on this run at these potatoes. One thing that I wanted to mention here was that when I did my training runs, I didn't consume anything. I didn't consume anything at all during the run. And so one thing that I heard for people said was, don't do anything out of the ordinary on race day that you didn't do in your training run. So I was really determined not to consume too much along the race, because that's where you see people get into GI trouble, is that they're consuming all this water and Gatorade and possibly even other stuff like potatoes, and they get really irritated. And that's where you see people throwing up and things like that. So I was really determined not to do that. But at the same time, I was running really fast. Once again, I was running way faster than I expected to be running. So I was like, I'm going to need fuel to do this. So I definitely had a few things of water at the water tables. I had a few Gatorades at the Gatorade tables, and they're just like little cups full of like a couple shots. Just pouring it down my mouth, all over my front, chest and everything. And then I had at that energy goo station, I had one of those, or I had maybe half of that, just to kind of like get a little bit more sodium and some other things in, just because it was available. And that was really all I did as far as nutrition on the run: water, Gatorade, a little bit of energy goo, and that was that. So at about mile 4 or 4.5, I started to get this weird feeling that I was going to see my parents, because my parents obviously live in Nashville. They had told me they weren't going to make it to the race because there was too much traffic and they're on the older side. So I completely understood that. But I started getting this weird feeling that I was going to see them. And sure enough, at about mile 5 for me, I'm running along and I start hearing my name, look forward, and I see my parents and their 2 dogs that they have, that our family has, and they're on the side of the road. And I just ran up to them smiling, and my dad's filming. And it just was like this incredible moment where my parents came out to support me, and I got this massive like just spurt of energy again. And it was just like, oh my gosh, I felt so good. So once again, first 5-6 miles of this run, I felt incredible. Just running at this, I'm looking at it now, the split's about 7:20, 7:25 pace for miles all the way through 6, 7, everything. And I'm just thinking the whole time, I'm running way faster than I ever have. Like, am I going to break down at any point? So the route goes out of Nashville, kind of going south. And then once you go all the way south, then you turn and come back down into downtown Nashville. So you go back up north and then into the downtown area. And it was awesome. You're running along and you're in a city and there's just people everywhere. We had a portion of the run down there around that 5-mile mark where my parents were, where it was all residential. So you had people outside kind of tailgating early in the morning with their coffee and stuff. People had signs, they had tables set up. I saw people that had like multiple tables full of food, and they had all their friends there watching the race, people cheering you on. There were so many people watching this race, like just throughout the route in Nashville. And the energy was incredible because it kind of keeps the energy going, right? Like, you're running alone for the majority of this thing, but there are people on each side of the road just constantly cheering you on and keeping you going. And it was an awesome experience to kind of continue to feed off of that energy and adrenaline that I had going, which were the reasons that I was running as fast as I was. So I'm going. And I think it wasn't until probably mile 9-ish when I started to really feel the effects of how I was running, how fast I was running. And at that point, it went from, I kind of felt the adrenaline leave a little bit, where I was like, okay, I've used up enough of this adrenaline, and it became more of a grind. And it was like, it went from effortless to all of the effort I had, essentially. So I get into mile 8 so let's go back a little bit. Mile 7 was a 7-minute 25 pace. Once again, mile 8 was a 7-minute 12 pace. So that was quick for me. And then mile 9 is back to 7:25. So you can see at that point, I'm still really grinding it out. Mile 10 was a 7-minute 9-second pace. Really, really fast. That was the fastest mile, which is pretty crazy, because once again, at mile 10, I was hurting. And it was pure just grit at this point. Running through downtown Nashville, really struggling. Now, one thing that I noticed is I obviously had my Apple Watch, and it's giving me all the typical readouts. I am monitoring my current pace. I'm monitoring my average pace, which at the time I remember looking and just seeing that 7-minute 25 pace. And I'm thinking, this is awesome. I'm killing it. I'm also monitoring my heart rate and all sorts of other metrics, my overall time and things. One thing I noticed was they would have these big banners at certain mile markers, like mile 10, for example. They had one, maybe mile 6, things like that, mile 5. I don't think they were at every mile, but they had big banners that were, I guess, taking your time and then also letting people know where they were at. One thing I noticed, though, was that my watch was showing I was 0.3 miles ahead of what the banners were saying. So when I hit the 10-mile mark banner on the race track, my watch said I was at 10.3 miles. So I'm thinking that's a little strange. Something's wrong here, as far as like what my watch is tracking and what the race track is saying. But get down to the capital, the capital in Nashville, state of Tennessee, and I'm chugging along at this point. I had actually met back up with that original dude who I was running with at the beginning of the race. We obviously never said anything to each other, but we had kind of been running at the same pace this whole time. And it was down near Jefferson Street in Nashville, where the half marathon runners and the marathon runners split. So there's like this street where all of a sudden you just see all these signs and arrows, and the right side said half marathon, the left side said full marathon. So you're, based on what you're running, you split off and the route changes slightly, and you run through this little portion of kind of Capitol Hill that's different from the marathon runners. And then the two routes meet up again before a bridge that takes you over the river and back over to Nissan Stadium. And so at that point, the half marathon runners are running in the right side of the road, and the full marathon runners are running in the left side of the road. At this point, I was absolutely hurting, like really, really was in pain. My legs were killing me. I was just hurting. Like I felt like my left leg was kind of like almost like giving out a little bit, like not giving out. It just felt like something was creaking in there a little bit. And it was just such a grit, such a grind. And at this point, like I was so just ready for this run to be over with. It went from being super, super exhilarated and super excited and happy about the fact that I was doing this and running on adrenaline and just going super fast, to being like, I cannot wait for this thing to be over. Just absolutely killing me. So once again, just to keep you up with the splits, and I'll have these up on the screen, but mile 11 was 7-minute 19 seconds. Mile 12 was 7-minute 18 seconds. Mile 13 was 7 minutes 42 seconds. So you can see how much grind I was going through at that point. The frustrating thing was, once again, my watch was tracking my run, and I hit 13.1, which is the distance of a half marathon, well before the end of the race, which is frustrating to me, because I'm like, okay, I've hit the half marathon pace, and this thing is accurate. Like I trust this distance on the watch. And I don't know what was going on. And I actually started wondering yesterday, did I miss something, or did I like run the route incorrectly or run too much? I don't think I did. I just guessed that there was more. I don't know. I really don't have an explanation for why my distance was so much different than what the marathon people had put up. But we go across the river, and I'm running. Basically, I started to hear the woman who was over the loudspeaker at the finish line, and she was talking, and that's when I was like really, really just relieved, because I was like, okay, finally this thing's over with. At this point, I'm well into the 13th mile, and I remember seeing the full marathon runners. Once again, they're on the other side of the road as us, but we're running in the same direction, so I can watch them. Just instead of turning right to go to the finish line for the half marathon, they just had to keep going straight, starting off on their second half marathon. And I remember I don't think I've ever felt so grateful in my entire life that I wasn't doing something. Just watching those people go on to run another 13.1, it just was like, I cannot believe that would be a thing that you would do. I was so tired, so ready to be done with this run. And once again, started hearing the woman on the loudspeaker, rolled into the finish stretch, and I kind of like decided that I wanted to just basically sprint the end of this run. So I absolutely sprinted as far as I could. And as I'm seeing in my splits here, my total distance for this run from start to finish, literally starting line to finish line, was 13.57 on my watch. And the last 0.57, I ran at a 6:59 pace. I was under 7 minutes. So I was cooking, sprinting after having run 13 miles before this. And I was so tired. I sprinted through the finish line, stopped my watch, and it was over with. And I just, it was like, I almost like blacked out. I was so tired. And I'm walking through the sort of finish area, and people are handing me stuff. The guy holds out a medal, and I grab it. For some reason, I didn't think I was going to get a medal, so that was cool. I grab a medal, and then there's like stations just all flanking the side of this finish stretch, where after the finish line, they had this whole street full of just people giving you stuff, specifically like all sorts of nutrition. So there was giant bins of water, there was bananas, there was all sorts of different energy bars and all sorts of stuff to refuel. So I'm kind of walking along, I'm just absolutely exhausted, and I hear my name being screamed, and look over, and it is my girlfriend and her mom. And that was just incredible, a sight for sore eyes to see them. And went over, and just, they were so happy to see me, and they were like, I can't believe how fast you ran it in. Like, they were, because basically the run, there's an app that you can download, and your friends and family can track you while you run and see how fast you're going and stuff. And they were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you just absolutely flew, and you ran so fast and all this. And I was shocked, because I'd kept up this 7:20, 7:25 pace throughout the entire race. And I just literally, I couldn't believe that. So finished the race, and basically at that point we had to wait for the 4 people that I'd come with to run. So I ended up finishing the race. I think 9:04 was my official finish time, 9:04 a.m. And we had a few of people in the group that were 30, 35, 40 minutes later that crossed the finish line. So I had to wait for a while. One thing that was very bad about the finish was, like I said earlier, my clothing choices were great. I didn't really, there was one point in the run where I got kind of hot, and I pulled my gloves off and rolled my sleeves up. And then the sweat that was there got super cold. And so within 5 minutes, I was freezing again, and I had to put my gloves back on and ran the rest of the race with them on. But generally speaking, my clothing choices were perfect. But at the end of the race, when I'm standing there, I finished up, and I'm standing in this ending corral area. I basically, like, it was like my body kind of went in shock, and I got literally freezing. Granted, it's like in the 40s outside, so it's cold, and everybody who's just spectators are all bundled up and everything, and I'm standing there. There wasn't really a ton of sweat. It was mostly just like my body temperature just rapidly plummeted after I stopped with all this activity, just standing there. And before I knew it, I was like chattering, like freezing cold. And there was a couple pictures that I took, one with my girlfriend, and she took a couple of me alone, and I was so cold. And I saw runners who had space blankets, which are like those silver foil looking things, and they were wrapping themselves around them, but I couldn't figure out where they were giving them out. So I'm standing there just freezing cold. And finally I'm walking along with my girlfriend, because we're waiting for her brother, and I see one in the trash can, and I'm like, I don't even care. I'm so cold. I just grabbed it, and it's just a space blanket. It had been opened a few minutes earlier by someone who didn't want to use it. So I put it around my shoulders and like kind of my chest area, and it was really small, but within 5 minutes, I felt perfect, because we kind of got in the sun, and I had the space blanket over me, and I felt great. So one thing that I would definitely do differently is to try to have whoever's going to be there at the finish line for me, have them bring like some pants to throw on and a jacket or something if we're going to be waiting around, because that was bad and potentially could have been terrible. But legs were just gone. My legs felt horrific at the end of the race, because I'd put so much stress and strain on them. And I really was just happy to be finished. And we were about to go, once everybody had finished up, we were going to go down to a place in Nashville that kind of a bar restaurant place that had all sorts of good food and beer and stuff. So I was excited about that, but I was just happy to be finished with it at that point. So that was my race. Official times for everything. My official time for the race was an hour, 40 minutes and 4 seconds. And that was to run 13.57 miles. So once again, I don't really understand why the race wasn't 13.1 and my watch tracked it at 13.57. That's a big disparity. If it was like 13.2, I would be like, okay, this is just the difference between me running the route and the people who set the route out. But 13.57 is a big difference between 13.1. So my official race time was an hour, 40 minutes and 4 seconds, but my actual 13.1 speed, which is my actual, in my opinion, half marathon time, was 1 hour, 36 minutes and 25 seconds. Additionally, the Nike Run Club app told me that on this run, I ran my fastest ever, my personal record for the 10K speed. So that was 45 minutes and 28 seconds. So that's pretty cool as well. I kind of did 2 personal records there. And then the run was over, and we went out, got some beers and had fun. And at this point, I guess I can just talk briefly about the aftermath of the run. It's 3 days later now. It's Tuesday, 4 days later. And my legs feel significantly better than they did. But basically the day of the race and the day after, I really had a hard time walking. I couldn't really walk. The majority of the soreness was in my hamstrings, but I also had soreness in areas of my legs that I had never felt soreness before. Like the upper lateral side of my shin was sore, which I didn't even know that could happen. Usually if I have shin soreness, it's in the lower medial side, but it was lateral and upper, which was weird. Additionally, the tops of my feet were sore, which was strange. Obviously the bottoms were sore as well, but like the tops where it's more bony, that was sore. I assumed, and especially the right one, I assumed the reason for that was possibly because I had my shoes a little bit too tight. And also too, I guess it was just so much impact. But I've been really, really sore for the past couple of days. Like I said, today, now on Tuesday, race being Saturday, my legs feel great again. Moving forward, what's next? So I've been running really, really consistently, like I said, for the past almost 2 years now. And I have really grown to love running. It's something that's just become part of my life. It's something that makes me feel great. But at the same time, I understand that it's something that, just like anything, too much of it is a bad thing. So I think for the foreseeable future, I'm going to take a little bit of a break from it. And that's not to say that I'm not going to run at all. I can already feel like today, sort of the itch to go out and run a little bit. But I do plan to continue running through this time. I'm just going to greatly reduce the amount of running that I'm doing. So what was 4 and 5 mile runs consistently are going to become more sparse and closer to like 2 miles every once in a while, because I want to keep running. I want to keep staying in shape, keep up the cardio health and everything, but I need a little bit of a break from it. And to that end, I'm going to use this time to put on some weight, because I've gotten extremely skinny in this half marathon process. And I've noticed about my body is that I have a really hard time keeping weight on, specifically keeping muscle on. And something that I'd like to be is more muscular than skinny. So I'd really like to get back into lifting weights more consistently and to put on some muscle and try to keep it on. I have been lifting weights consistently over the past couple of months in my gym at my apartment. But with the amount of running that I've been doing, it's been hard to keep on any sort of level of muscle. So I'd like to, in this time, get back into lifting and try to put on a little bit of muscle. I think it'd be a nice thing for me to do. And moving forward with the running, what are my thoughts about half marathons and marathons and all that? I will 100% be doing this again. It was so much fun in retrospect. It was such an exhilarating experience. The adrenaline that I felt on race day, especially in the beginning part of the race, was something unlike anything I've really ever felt. I've played in a lot of different sporting events, some of them very big. I played in a national championship in hockey when I was younger, which was a really amazing thing. I played in a state championship in hockey as a senior in high school. That was really exhilarating. This was a different kind of exhilarating just because there were so many people and there was so much energy. So I will be doing this again. In fact, I already have been thinking about it. What's the next one I can do? So that's how it happens. That's how it starts. But with respect to the full marathon discussion, because that's something I'm interested in and toying with, I do think I will be doing a full marathon at some point, but I think it's going to be a major commitment. And I don't know if it's going to be something I can do during dental school. I think maybe late dental school might be a little bit more feasible, but certainly no time soon. The impact that run would have on my body would be very great, especially considering what the impact of the half had on my body was like. Granted, I ran the half marathon, like I've said many times, at a pace that I did not expect to run. That 7:22 pace that I was running at was really unlike what I expected to be at. It was way faster, which obviously put way more stress and strain on my body. If I ran a full marathon, it would be a lot slower. Probably, who knows, but 8:30, 8:40, somewhere up in there. We'll see, though. It's something that I want to do. It's kind of a life bucket list goal, but to kind of sum all of this up, the half marathon experience was amazing. It was something that I never expected to do in my life when I was younger. For essentially my entire life, the longest organized run that I had done in one sitting was 2.5 miles. And I thought that was just so much. And the other day I ran 13.57 in one go. It was fun. It was exhilarating. It was a moment of realization to me that this thing that I had set my mind, spirit, and body to for all of this time was paying off in such a wonderful way. And it was a moment where I felt grateful that God gave me legs to run and lungs to breathe. It was a moment where I felt really, really proud of myself and what I had accomplished physically and mentally and emotionally and all of these things. And it was just something that kind of, once again, for me, was a little joy of my life, an experience that I'll never forget and one that I'll take with me and carry with me into the future as I try to pursue this constant state of physical fitness and health moving forward in my life. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I've been talking for 42 minutes, it says on my thing here, which is a long time for one guy to sit around and talk to a microphone. But I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. I know it's a little different than the typical format, but like I continue to say with my channel, I'd like for it to be a little bit more comprehensive than just dentistry. But I will be coming back with some good guests here in the future for the podcast specifically, and I also have a ton of different content that I'm going to be producing for the YouTube channel and things moving forward as I get into my winter break here for my second year of dental school. So a lot of good things to come. Really, really am excited to see where the channel goes and where my future with content creation goes, because like I said, something I'd really enjoy having is someone to help me film, make things a little bit easier on me. I think that would be an ideal scenario, just to have someone help me get all this footage so that I can then have the footage that I need to use in editing and make really, really good, lasting, and impactful content. But that's that. That is the explanation and the story of my first half marathon. And if you're interested and you have any specific questions, let me know. You can comment on any of my YouTube videos and I'll see it. And once again, be on the lookout for a more succinct and precise video on the actual specific things that I learned and would maybe do differently or do the same in my next half marathon from this first experience. So thank you all for listening. Once again, my name is Steven. I am a second year dental student, and that's the longest run of my life, and it was quite a good time. So thank you all again for listening. I appreciate you, and I will speak to you again soon here on Teeth Time. And until then, I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you for listening to the Teeth Time podcast. I hope this conversation was at least somewhat enjoyable for you. Remember to check out my YouTube channel. That's Stephen P. Ray on YouTube, where you'll find plenty of visual content about the life of a dental student and creator. Also check out my Instagram at steven.p.ray.dentistry. Long name, I know. I appreciate each and every one of you. This has been Teeth Time, and I'm out.